Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy is the brand new installment in the story of the beloved heroine. While everyone was initially excited to hear that there would be a fourth movie in the series, its release has seemingly not had the mega-romcom sparkle we might have imagined. So what's really going on with the film? Why is there an age gap romance? Why is it so sad?
Oh, no, it's fine.
And why did the studio fumble what should have been a big hit? Let's unpack all of that, plus analyze the actually important message the movie and series as a whole is trying to send, and what the ending really means. Many people, even Bridget Jones fans, weren't even aware that the movie was released over Valentine's Day weekend, because in the US, it was just unceremoniously thrown onto the streaming platform Peacock, instead of getting any kind of real release in theaters. While the previous two sequels in the series weren't mega hits in terms of box office numbers, they did do just fine. This film being forced into the direct-to-streaming realm is indicative of the larger issue of studios not always being able to read the room. In addition to being a new installment in a beloved series, it loosely fits into the so-called Year of the MILF that propelled hits like Baby Girl, and it would have made for a perfect Valentine's Day group outing. But maybe we should just be happy it didn't get deleted for tax purposes. The biggest news around the film is the fact that Bridget's love interest from the last three movies, Mark Darcy, whom she finally married in the last one, died 4 years before this story begins. While the loss of Mark has come as a shock to those who didn't read the book when it released in 2013, it actually does thematically make a lot of sense, and not just in the fact that they wanted Bridget to be single for every film. We'll unpack what all is really going on there in just a sec. In Mad About the Boy, we find Bridget trying to pull the pieces of her life back together after losing Mark.
Can you survive?
I think so. I have to. I'm trying.
She's now a single mother to 2 children, and at 51, feeling like she's entering a very new stage of her life. She's trying to find a path forward in a number of ways, not only out of her own grief, but also helping her children cope with theirs, while also trying to get her career back on track, and figure out what she wants her life to look like with the new card she's been dealt.
It is actually impossible to do this on your own.
The film does focus a lot on grief, on multiple occasions veering into total tearjerker territory. This can feel a bit depressing at times, and some viewers have felt that it's a bit too depressing for a film that they were hoping was going to help give them an escape from all the sadness around them in the real world. But Bridget Jones has always been about fully exploring the breadth of what life has to offer, the good and bad, with truth and humor. And as we'll unpack, while Bridget's grief is deep and painful, it's actually very important. In addition to her grief, the movie also deals with so many of the other pressures Bridget has to deal with, from trying to keep up and excel in the modern working world, to everything that comes with being a single mother and beyond. She's also still dealing with image issues. And while some have felt that this was out of place, an attempt by the film to drag her back to her younger self and problems, it does actually make a lot of sense. People still very much have to deal with body and image issues, especially women who lived through and had their minds altered by the early 2000s.
Resolution number 1. Obviously, we'll lose 20 pounds.
Bridget struggled because of the untenable ideas forced upon her by society then, and that we see her still struggling with attempts to fit into today's beauty standards is totally in line with reality. What has changed with time, importantly, is her ability to realize that these societal pressures aren't good for her, or making her happy, and make the decision to focus her time and attention elsewhere. Of course, in regular Bridget Jones fashion, we pop back into her life when she's bumbling her way back out onto the dating scene.
You've actually made it to the 4th stage of the 5 stages of grief.
It's acceptance, which basically means you just have to get laid.
While Mark's death might come as a shock after the last film, making it seem like they were finally getting their happily ever after together, losing Mark does make sense thematically within Bridget's story. They never really seemed happy when they were actually together, and even broke up previously because of that issue.
I always felt that you were never there, and I was mostly alone.
They were always into the idea of being together, of what their relationship could be, but when they actually settled into a relationship, the cracks in that foundation always began to show.
We always loved the fantasy of us, but the reality, as we both know, is quite different.
Of course, it's possible that after getting married, they did finally figure things out. And from what we learn, it does seem like that's the case. Though, of course, we're also seeing everything through the tint of grief and loss. In their relationship, Bridget has always had to come up against the reality that they would never really be together in the way she imagined. But she was always pulled in by the chance that they could make things work. And this is what adds another, quieter dimension to her grief, the loss of what could have been. of who they could have become if given the time to really try to figure things out. But as she's learned in the past, as much as she loves him, her self-worth and future aren't totally bound to Mark. And it's in this fourth installment that we see Bridget coming to terms with now having no other choice but to figure out how to move on without him. Daniel Cleaver is still in Bridget's life, but not as a possible romantic partner. Realizing that they'd never work in a relationship, they've instead finally settled into a genuine and caring friendship, with Daniel even becoming a surrogate uncle to her kids. But of course, every Bridget Jones film must set her up with two romantic options: the fun guy and the stoic guy. This time with 29-year-old rockster and school teacher Scott. When life feels frantic, it can be so easy to push off things, even super important things like going to the doctor. Whether you just feel too busy with everything else, figure things will just sort themselves out, or just don't even have time to figure out which doctor to go to. It can add so much more stress to an already stressful situation. But thanks to Zocdoc, booking doctor's appointments doesn't have to feel so daunting anymore. They take out all of the stress and make it so easy to find and book a doctor who's right for what you need. Zocdoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click instantly to book an appointment. Zocdoc helps you book in-network appointments with over 100,000 doctors across every specialty, from urgent and primary care to mental health to dentists and beyond. It's easy to filter for doctors who take your insurance, are located near you, and fit your individual needs. And you can check real reviews from their patients to help you make your decision. You can see their available appointments, choose the time that works for you, and then click to book instantly. And you often won't have to do a lot of waiting around. Appointments made through Zocdoc typically happen within 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even nab same-day appointments. Using Zocdoc has made finding and booking a doctor so much easier for me. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to Zocdoc.com/thetake to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/thetake. Zocdoc.com/thetake. Bridget's relationship with Rockster is the age gap relationship everyone was initially worried would make the film feel odd or out of touch, but thankfully it's handled very well and actually adds to the story. He's not just younger than her for the sake of some extra drama, but instead to function as a metaphor. They're at very different stages in their lives, and both find themselves wishing that they had a time machine to be able to change things and put them both on equal footing. But in the same way we can't go back in time and be younger, we also can't leap other people forward. We all have to take life as it comes and live in the present. And this is why, in the end, Bridget realizes that for all of the ways they do work, they'll never truly work out. But importantly, the film isn't flippant about their relationship. Sure, they're not meant to be together forever, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact on both their lives. With Daniel and now Rockster, and even with Jack in Bridget Jones' Baby to a certain extent, the series does a great job of throwing out the old school notion that only one big great love matters in your life, and everyone else you ever dated becomes nothing to you once you find that person. Instead, we get to see how all of these guys, and their different personalities and strengths, have added to Bridget's own life, and vice versa, even if they weren't the one. And that brings us to Mr. Scott Wallaker, the reserved and seemingly distant science teacher. As with Mark, Bridget's bubbly, occasionally over-the-top personality kind of freaks him out a little bit at first, but also draws him to her. Neither's life has turned out like they had imagined. Bridget's was totally thrown off course, and Scott had always imagined that he would have children of his own to care for. They're polar opposites in so many ways, but also have enough life experience to understand that that not only isn't a bad thing, it's often a plus.
You are this force to me. Equal and opposite.
She helps break through his shell to the kind and caring person underneath, and he helps Bridget's son grapple with the loss of his father. Theirs is decidedly not a whirlwind romance, but instead one built up slowly and based on mutual care and interest.
All parents know the marshmallow is an essential tool, Mr. Walker.
But as with every Bridget Jones movie, the story is about more than just her romantic relationships. In addition to losing Mark, in the years between installments, Bridget also lost her father. In a flashback, we see how his final wish was to implore her not to give up on herself or her life.
Promise me you'll live, Bridget.
This is really the key to Bridget's story. No matter what life throws at her, no matter how down and out she might feel, she always finds a way to keep going in the end. One thing that also makes her so relatable to viewers, too, is that she's allowed to mope and complain a bit in the process, instead of being expected to just wake up and immediately hop back on the horse. Bridget shows how life is a continual process. One of the best things about the original movie, and something that has continued through the sequels, is the willingness to accept that personal growth doesn't equal perfection, or require you to realize some ideal form of yourself. Just improving and learning to love yourself more, even if it isn't always 100%, is still a win. Throughout the series, every ending has felt like we're leaving her on a happily ever after high note, only to find her back down in the dumps at the start of the next installment. This makes sense for a film series as it gives her character obstacles to overcome. Just having her going up and up and up would come across as unrealistic and odd. But it's also just how life works. A lot of life is taking 2 steps forward when you can, and sometimes just having to deal with the reality of falling 1 or 2 or 3 steps back. And while Bridget's grief is real and painful, it doesn't drag the story down. Instead, it makes it feel true to life, even when it seems like you've finally got things figured out, and your life is going just the way you want. Things can, and often will, go wrong. And Bridget shows us that while the process of moving through this grief can be long and difficult, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. While Bridget was often wishing for her own movie magic fairy tale, her story in fact shows us the importance of working to build your own happily ever after. Even through all of the ups and downs, successes and heartbreaks, Bridget has never lost her own spark. She's grown and changed, but she is still, at her core, Bridget Jones. The real things she has that feel like lovely movie magic in the end aren't the rom-com romance moments, but instead things like close, long-time friendships and a willingness to always keep trying. The most aspirational thing about the Bridget Jones series in the end isn't her relationship with any one guy, but instead the community of loving people she has around her.
I'll be honest, I don't know what I'd have done the past 20 years without you lot.
20? No, 30s?
It's more like 30 years, to be honest.
And that isn't something that she had to change herself to go out to find. It's been there with her all along.
To Bridget, who cannot cook, but who we love.
Just as she is.
Just as she is.
What has changed is that she's come to appreciate them even more, and to expand that circle to include even more caring people. And this is where we leave Bridget at the end of this peek into her life. She has entered into a loving relationship with a very hot guy, but that isn't the sole focus of her life. Together with all of her loved ones, she's celebrating walking into a new era of her life filled with all kinds of love, and with hope for the future, whatever it may bring. And this doesn't mean Bridget is forgetting Mark and what they had, but instead she's just experiencing the truth of living with loss. As you move on, the grief will never leave you 100%, but you find ways to cope and keep their memory alive by building the happy life that they would have wanted for you. Earlier in the film, Bridget and her children wrote notes to Mark and released them attached to balloons, symbolizing beginning to release the pain of losing him. At the very end of the film, we see another symbol. The owl that has come to function as a metaphor for Mark's memory returns, symbolizing how the memories of those we've lost are always with us and will always keep coming back when we need them. But we can't get lost dwelling on them forever, because we have to keep living.
It's not enough to survive, you've got to live.
That's the take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.